Well, I don't think we could have said we saw this one coming. At the end of the session in Quebec City on Friday, at the end of it all, PSPP, Paul St-Pierre Plamondon, got up during his, presser and actually said, and I'm kind of being careful here, he accused the Liberal Party of having engaged in what he called financing that is clearly illegal, his words, involving dozens of people. Then he raised the question of whether there were ties to organized crime, which, as I said, caught everybody by surprise. The Liberals came out. Charles Milliard, the leader of the provincial Liberals, came out, warned him that, it comes very close to defamation, and he's given him, I believe, Paul St-Pierre Plamondon until Wednesday to reply to this. But in the meantime, after the Liberals came out with, their defense, Paul St-Pierre Plamondon did not back down and said this.
The press conference of Mr. Milliard didn't answer any of the questions in terms of transparency, any of the questions relevant to understanding those practices of financing of the party, and yet attacked me personally on several grounds that I would be authoritarian, that I would lack rigor, and that was arrogant from an intellectual standpoint. Therefore, I have consulted my lawyers, and I do not have any intention of retracting myself. And I want to defend my right to ask relevant and plausible questions as a member of the National Assembly of Quebec during my activities in that parliament.
Okay, so that's Paul St-Pierre Plamondon basically saying, I'm not backing down, letter or mise en demeure or not. Perla Eliadis is a human rights lawyer and associate professor of law at McGill, and she's on the line. Perla, thank you for coming on today. Let me ask the question here. I said originally there was a deadline of Wednesday for Paul St-Pierre Plamondon to answer this charge. What happens if he, in fact, maintains, as you just heard, that he does not plan to apologize? What's next?
The next thing would be filing a lawsuit if they stick to that deadline.
And does it matter that this happened in the National Assembly as opposed to outside it as part of a press conference? How does that change anything?
Oh, yes, it does matter. It's an important question. So there's a long and storied tradition in Canadian parliamentary traditions, which the National Assembly reflects. It's part of the Westminster tradition, where what is said in the House, in the National Assembly, in legislatures, in these types of systems are completely protected. Now, the Speaker of the House may reprimand somebody for unparliamentary language and so on, but those rules are internal to our legislatures. But the minute you step outside the legislature, the normal rules of civil law in this case apply.
So all of this happened in the National Assembly. Does that mean that Paul St-Pierre Plamondon is off the hook? This letter from the Liberals, this mise en demeure, is just that an empty threat?
Well, when I say in the legislature, he wasn't in chamber, if I understand it. It was a scrum, right? It was a presser?
Yeah.
So my understanding is that he would not receive the same degree of protection.
Uh-huh. Now, when I started talking about this earlier today, my first question was, maybe you can't weigh in on this, but I'm thinking to myself, if you're going to accuse someone of having, potential ties to organized crime, A, that's a pretty serious accusation, and B, it's not as if you're holding up proof that, look, the reason I'm saying this is so-and-so, which he did not. So can he, you're a lawyer, can you just go ahead and do something like this and not have to deal with any repercussions at all?
Well, you're right. I'm not going to talk about this, okay. but I think it's helpful for people to know that in Quebec, the way that the civil law works is that defamation is part of the general civil law of fault or negligence. It's not its own specific thing, the way it is in common law jurisdictions. It's part of the general idea that if you hurt someone, cause them injury, and there's a causal relationship between the fault and the injury, then liability follows. So that's the general principle. It's very simple. It's a kind of a 3-part test, and it applies to really all kinds of negligence and stuff outside contracts, if you will. So that's the principle that would apply here. And to respond to your question about, can you just say anything? This really is an exception to the principle of free expression, right? We have the general principle of freedom of expression, and one of the limits to it is defamation. So if you say something in the case of defamation that A, is not true, B, hurts in this case, it would be the Liberal Party of Quebec. You can show the damage in terms of, for example, lowered trust, an impact on the credibility. Of course, being associated with criminal activity would, of course, affect a political party. Were it proven, and of course it would need to be proven, and that would be a question of fact.
So if I just expand on that, I would imagine this, if it plays out, if it were to go to the next step, and in fact there was a lawsuit launch, right? This would take months and months and months to eventually get anywhere. So I'm thinking part of the ploy, and I know you can't comment on this, but part of the ploy here would be, you know what, I'm going to say this anyway, because I know that for it to eventually be settled would take forever, and it'll be forgotten about by then, and the impact has already been made. Does that seem like a logical approach?
Do you mean from the perspective of the PQ or the PLQ?
Yeah, the PQ.
Look, there's a difference between the political tactics and the legal response. I think one must be careful in the no-holds-barred approach to the political side to make sure you don't step over the line, right? And it seems to me that from a political standpoint, and Tom Mulcair said this in his comments earlier, that this does appear from a political perspective to have crossed the line. Whether it's crossed the line from a legal perspective will have to be something a court will decide, but certainly by responding this quickly and drawing their own line in the sand, the PLQ is also putting the ball back to some extent in Plamondon's court. So
last question. If this was to go ahead, right, and was to end up, in court, how long a period would this take? Would it be days? Could you demand an emergency ruling on something like this or not? I would be very surprised if an emergency ruling were possible. So it could take months, conceively, right? Yeah, I mean, delays before the Superior Court of Quebec this is not a motion, right? This is not like an injunction where you can get it before the court on an urgent basis. This is a sort of standard type of legal proceeding and action, and they will take, it can take a long time. So the back and forth publicly is in a sense aimed at the court of public opinion, including, of course, on the show, right? Yeah. And there you go. There you go. Yeah, Pearl, I thank you so much. Always appreciate it. Not at all. Take care. Pearl Eliadis. So there you go. I think based on what she just said, I'm thinking, you know what? If you did that as the PQ, you know that this thing, if it does in fact end up in court, as she just said, could linger there for a long, long time before there's any kind of settlement. And by then, the election will have been long, long over. Maybe that's the play. 3:30. Jason's got your news. He's next.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Bryan Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
or the free iHeartRadio app.